What if our entire reality isn't a collection of things at all, but is actually a single, unfolding action? Today we're diving into a really cutting-edge theory that says just that. And what's fascinating is that its roots, they stretch all the way back 2,500 years. We're going on a journey from ancient Greece right up to the digital age.
Okay, so let's just jump right in with the big question, the one that really kicks this whole thing off. Is the universe a static place, filled with stuff, like a giant cosmic garage? Or is it a continuous event, one grand, unfolding process? This single question is literally the starting gun for an intellectual quest that has spanned millennia.
And our quest begins, as so many of these big ideas do, way back in ancient Greece. This is where a couple of thinkers laid down the essential groundwork, and what's wild is that, at first glance, their ideas seem to completely contradict each other.
First up, we've got Heraclitus. Now, he looked at the world around him and saw one thing above all else: constant, unending change, flux. This famous quote of his, it's so much more than just pretty poetry. It's a radical statement. He's saying that nothing, absolutely nothing, is static. Everything, and that includes you and me, is in a state of perpetual becoming.
So, Heraclitus gives us this concept that philosophers now call process ontology. It's really just a fancy way of saying that being is a verb, not a noun. Reality isn't what is, it's what's constantly becoming. And you have to get this, because this idea, it's the absolute bedrock of the whole emergent reality model.
But then, along comes Plato, who just completely flips the script. He says, hold on a second, the physical world we see and touch, that's not the real deal. That's just a shadow. The true reality, he argued, is the world of pure information. It's the abstract blueprints, the unchanging mathematical forms that structure everything we experience.
And check this out, because this is where you can see the direct line. For Plato, the visible world is a shadow. In the emergent reality model, we call it a rendering. For Plato, the source was the invisible forms. For ERM, it's the invisible logical structure. Plato was the first to basically say that reality is an interface, and the source code behind it is pure information. All right, so for the next 2,000 years or so, this core idea starts to evolve in some really fascinating ways. It gets passed through the hands of mystics, martyrs, and eventually the pioneers who are laying the groundwork for computation.
I mean, just look at the huge gaps on this timeline. This was not a quick debate happening over a few years. This was an intellectual torch being carefully passed through the darkness of centuries, from one brilliant mind to the next.
So first we have Plotinus. He takes Plato's ideas and transforms them into this grand mystical system. He describes reality as a sort of cosmic cascade, flowing down from a single source, which he called the One, down through mind, then through soul, until it finally crystallizes as matter. It's incredible. He was describing downward recursion 1,800 years before we had the language for it.
Then came Giordano Bruno, and this is where the idea gets dangerous. He took this concept and just ran with it. He declared that the universe was infinite, that there were countless other worlds out there, and that mind, or consciousness, was woven into the very fabric of it all. For this incredible vision, the church burned him alive. He literally became a martyr for the idea of cosmic consciousness.
But Bruno's intuition, as brilliant as it was, had a tiny flaw. He thought consciousness was a kind of substance, like a special ingredient mixed into matter. And this is where ERM provides a crucial update. It says, no, consciousness isn't a thing at all. It's a recursive event. It's a process. It's an action, just like Heraclitus said way back at the beginning.
And that brings us to Leibniz, who is such a crucial bridge from all this deep philosophy to modern computation. He imagined the universe was made of these things he called monads, these tiny infinitesimal points of perception. But here's the key. They don't physically bump into each other. They operate in perfect synchrony, governed by what he called a pre-established harmony. He was basically describing a synchronized information network centuries before we ever conceived of the internet.
Okay, so this leads us to what is arguably the single biggest turning point in our entire story. It's a philosophical revolution, where the focus shifts dramatically from the world out there to the processor in here.
So what is the actual relationship between our minds and the world? For most of human history, we just assumed the world is out there, and it just sort of imprints itself onto our minds. But a philosopher named Immanuel Kant came along and asked, what if we have that completely backwards?
Kant's incredible insight, and it is a game changer, was that space and time are not external realities that we just happen to exist in. Nope. He said they are the fundamental software of the mind, the built-in operating system that structures every single one of our experiences. So we don't just passively perceive reality, our consciousness actively constructs it. ERM just updates this a bit, saying consciousness doesn't just structure the world, it literally renders it.
And now we finally enter the modern era. This is where thinkers start to really grasp the truly dynamic nature of consciousness, seeing it not as a static state, but as a self-referential flow.
The great psychologist William James actually gave us the term stream of consciousness. He argued that our inner experience isn't like a series of snapshots, but a continuous, seamless flow. He recognized intuitively that consciousness is a dynamic process where information is constantly being updated, which, that's a perfect description of a recursive loop.
Building right on that idea, the philosopher Henri Bergson looked at time itself. He argued that time isn't just a static clock ticking in the background. For him, the actual flow of time was the emergence of genuine novelty. It was the universe writing new code for itself in real time. He was describing recursion.
So let's do a quick recap of this incredible 2,500-year intellectual relay race. Heraclitus starts us off. Reality is flux. Plato takes the baton? No, it's information. Plotinus describes it as recursion, just in mystical terms. Leibniz sees it as computation. Kant argues that it is rendered by our minds, and James understands it's fundamentally dynamic. Each thinker carried that torch just a little bit further down the track.
And this all brings us to the finish line, the emergent reality model. It's the culmination of this epic journey. It's a modern framework that takes all of these powerful, separate insights from across the centuries and finally unifies them into a single, coherent, mathematical, and informational theory of a recursive reality.
So we end right back where we started, with a question. But this time it's not for the philosophers of the past, this one's for you. If this 2,500-year lineage of thought is pointing in the right direction, if consciousness isn't just a passive observer in the universe but is actively rendering it into being, well, what world will you choose to render?